everybody, it's your favorite gentleman, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. Today, you all are in for a treat. I have a very special guest who's joining us here on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And this man has a true passion. We're going to be talking about him and his philanthropy and his advocacy for our children. You won't want to miss a second of this phenomenal speaker joining us on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show today. So stay tuned, stay with us. You won't want to miss it. Here we go. Welcome to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. Today, I have with me, coming to the stage, Mr. Christopher Brown. This gentleman is a former preschool, kindergarten, and first grade teacher. He's also an award-winning researcher, teacher educator, and professor of early childhood education in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy at the University of Texas in Austin. His research centers on how education stakeholders across a range of political and educational contexts make sense, and his response and his work has been truly impactful, and as far as reform and changing the landscape for kindergartners and the education system as a whole. This man is ready for he asked a question. He wrote his book. Are you ready for kindergarten? Are your first graders ready for kindergarten? Freeing yourself from the readiness trap so that you and your child will succeed in kindergarten. His book seeks to replace any worries families might have about sending their child to kindergarten with wisdom and confidence. And we're going to break that book down today, and we're going to dissect some chapters in it. So help me welcome to the stage the incredible, the amazing, Mr. Christopher Brown. Welcome, Doctor. Welcome to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. We are glad to have you.
Thank you, Marcus, so much for having me here. That was a wonderful introduction. I don't think I've ever introduced so nicely in my life.
You deserve it, sir.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. You did all the hard work, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here. Doctor, what sparked the passion for kindergartners? What sparked the passion? When did you first hit you? When did you first realize that there's a need here for our children?
So part of it started when I was a kindergarten teacher. I've been working on this book off and on for about 10 years. And I left teaching kindergarten to go back and pursue my PhD because I was concerned about what was happening in early childhood classrooms. We were seeing a big shift from focusing on the children and the interest they bring to the classroom to the demands by policymakers and administrators for them to achieve academically at high levels. And as I had my own children, I have 3 daughters, and they all went through kindergarten. Those concerns increased even more. My oldest, Camille, is now a sophomore in college, and my youngest is a freshman in high school. And each year that they went through, the demands for academics over the interest they brought to the classroom were being emphasized. And then most recently, the reason I actually finished this book was my own brother. My niece is 7, and she went to kindergarten 2 years ago, and she had a rough kindergarten year. In the sense that there was some miscommunication between the home and the school. The teacher was focusing primarily on how she was doing academically and really wasn't paying attention to who she was as a person or as a learner. And so that really pushed me to finish this book. So the book that I wrote that you mentioned so kindly at the beginning of your podcast, the first part talks about this idea of kindergarten and the big idea around school readiness and why people are so concerned about it. And it gets at the practical and political issues surrounding that topic. And then the second half of the book, I actually kind of wrote with my brother in mind and his wife, who are just wonderful people. And my niece is amazing, helping families think about how they can get ready for this kindergarten environment where the conversation primarily focuses on academic achievement rather than who the children are, what their interests are, their social emotional level, things like that. So I wanted to give them some strategies to be ready for that, as well as to help prepare themselves and their child so that when they go into that kindergarten year, they feel prepared. They're not going to be taken aback by anything that might happen, as well as have some responses to give to teachers or administrators if they're giving them any push or asking them questions that they weren't ready for in that process.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Why is there such a fear? Why is there such a fear for parents and families? And I think you touched on it, but I wanted to, if you could dig a little deeper with us. Why is
Sure.
there such a fear of sending our children to kindergarten? Why? What can we do to change it? What are some tips, some strategies that we can help make that transition easier?
Well, so I think one fear is kind of the anecdotal part. As you become a parent, you're always worried about whether or not you're doing a good job for your child. You want to make sure that you're doing the best you can as a parent, so your child can be as successful as he or she can ever be as they go across their life. So you're always in this mode of, am I doing the right job? Am I doing a good job? Am I doing the right thing? And so when people start talking about kindergarten readiness as a parent, if you've never had a child go through school, it can make you nervous, and it can make you concerned about who your child is, whether or not they're ready for kindergarten, which I think the question should really be, are kindergartens ready for our children? That's where we need to really rethink that process. And so there's this anecdotal evidence you'll be hearing from friends and others. Then there's the policy or school administration side. And there's a big emphasis, the shift is focused dramatically that kindergartners should be reading, which doesn't necessarily line up with what we know about research or about who children are as learners. When children are ready or they're interested in reading, they usually pick it up quite easily. What happens, though, is we expect kids to be reading at specific points along their time in school, and that pressure can not always align with the child's interests. So there can be some tension there within that. So that's why there's the pressure from the schools, but there's also some pressure from being a parent and wanting what's best for your child and not being fully sure about what you should expect for your child as you go into kindergarten. So those two things are interacting together.
So that makes sense. So there's the pressures and the impact from the schools
Yes.
saying, "Hey, your child is turning 3 or your child is turning 4." So there's that pressure, and then there's
Yeah.
the family dynamic, right? There's the
Right.
family aspect putting pressures like, "Why is this child not in school yet?" And
Yeah.
then there's also your own personal desires. Well, you don't want your child to be delayed, or you don't want your child to
Right.
be slowed
Right.
in their learning curve. And then you're going to the playground, and kids around their age are now speaking, and your child
Yeah.
is still learning and figuring things out. So what do you and you lay this out in the book?
Yes.
What
No.
are some tips that you can tell if your child is ready for kindergarten?
Well, I don't think there's any one key factor. I think what you want to do to help get your child ready for school is, one, provide them with an opportunity to explore and make sense of the world on their own. So giving them opportunities to play with others, experiment in the house, make messes, make mistakes. All those things are really important so that they start to develop the skills of a learner, because kids are very naturally curious. Um, Alison Gopnik talks to this idea about that children are the research and development of human development. So they want to explore, they want to make sense of the world. So as parents or family members, we want to provide them with opportunities across the day where they can start to pursue their own interest. Other things we want to do is give them the chance to interact with others socially, be it through sports, play groups, church groups, whatever it may be. But kids need to learn how to interact with each other and how to get along with each other, as well as how to resolve conflict, how to speak for their demands and their own wants, and also to learn how to self-soothe themselves when they get upset or have a little breakdown. So how can I correct that and move forward so that we can get along and still have fun with our playing? In terms of academics, the easiest thing families can do for kids is make sure that they're reading to their child on a regular basis. That nighttime, getting ready for bed, sharing a story time is just so important. It provides children with an opportunity to be cared and nurtured for by their parent. It also shows how important literacy is to the child. And then having those conversations around books provides them with the skills and the knowledge that schools want to see, where they can tell what a story is about, how a story works, how to make predictions in a story, how stories typically have some type of resolution at the end, identifying characters, those types of things. And then, any kind of academic area, be it math, like counting, making counting fun. Cooking is a great activity to build those mathematical skills, giving them opportunities to grow physically. So giving them time outside, using their large and gross motor skills within that process. And then listening for their questions and their curiosities and being a respondent to that, just not ignoring it, but actually speaking with your child about whatever they may be curious about. Like, why does the sun come up in the morning, or things like that. So all those times where there is questions that sometimes as parents we become so overwhelmed, and it happens to me as well, we sometimes push those to the side. I think we have to sometimes take a step back and realize our child's, one, trying to connect with us, but two, they're also trying to make sense of the world, and they need us to guide them as they go through that process.
I love that. I truly love that. Mr. Christopher Brown, y'all. Huge. We are going to go to a quick commercial break. You guys stay tuned, stay with us, stay engaged. We'll be right back. Good day, podcast listeners. This is your boy, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I wanted to let you guys know that we will be rolling out a new feature and adding a join sponsor button next to the subscriber button here at the bottom of your screen. Once you click the button, it will display 3 membership levels. Gentleman Gentry, which is our entry level, Duke Duchess, which is our season level, and the Emperor and Empress, which is our most sophisticated level, which you will receive unique perks and benefits at each differing level and gain access to our community tab. We will also be sharing polls, upcoming events, and interviews, as well as receive feedback from our sponsors directly. Your support helps me find new and exciting guests to bring to the stage live. Well, in order to get the higher end speakers, it requires, you guessed it, money. So thank you for tuning in to my channel. And if becoming a sponsor sounds good to you, then select the join button below and choose your desired sponsor level. Let's continue to grow and serve the future of generations of men and women to come. Love you guys. Bye. We are back. We have the incredible Dr. Christopher Brown spilling the tea on his series of books and how we as parents, he just broke down, y'all. If you missed it, go back, scroll back, tune back in. But he broke down ways on not only how to prepare your children for kindergarten, but also how parents can develop themselves, reading to your children, stimulating their children, encouraging your children, and getting yourself prepared as a parent to get them ready for kindergarten and that first obstacle, that first hurdle in getting them integrated, because there's not a lot of focus on that. If you missed that, scroll back and tune back in. Mr. Brown,
Yes,
sir, I need your help. So there's a school of thought out there, and I need you to debunk this myth. What do we really know about sending our children to kindergarten at age 5? But there's a controversy on maybe holding your child back an additional year. What are the pros and cons of doing that?
So I think the research on this is actually mixed. I think, honestly, the easy answer is you know your child best. Do what you think is best for your child. There is some research. I'll give you a span of what's out there. One that shows kids who are a little bit older when they start kindergarten sometimes outperform their peers on academic measures. But typically, any level of advancement they've made fades out as they go through kindergarten and the other children catch up. On the other side, there's some research showing kids who are a little bit younger starting kindergarten actually grow faster and learn more because they have the opportunity to interact with older peers who have more knowledge and experience. So I think you have to really think about what's best for your child. I live in Texas, and particularly with boys, athletics are a big issue. And some parents want to hold their kids back so that when they'll be older when they start high school, particularly around football, where, weight and size makes a big difference. I think what's difficult sometimes as a parent to predict is how your child's going to grow and develop, as well as what they're going to be interested in. For example, one of my closest friends had a son who was big for his age, but he was younger when he went in. And so by the time he got to high school, his development had slowed down and had changed. So they weren't really sure what he was going to do or where he was going to be when he got to that age level. I think as parents, thinking, 10 years down the road is really hard. So I think you just should do what you think is best for your child at that moment, where if you feel like they're ready to go into a learning environment where they're going to be one of 20 kids, where they need that stimulation academically, socially, emotionally, it's a great time to send your child. If you feel like there's big concerns or red flags in your minds for sending your child to kindergarten, I would talk to your pediatrician. I would talk to your child's preschool teacher. And then for parents who are getting ready to go to kindergarten, particularly in the public schools typically have some type of open house prior to the school year. And making sure and going and talking with the kindergarten teachers and getting a sense of what that year is going to be like for your child. Because kindergarten is a different environment. You're one of 20 kids. You're working with one teacher, possibly an 8 if you're lucky. And your child has to be there for a good 6.5 hours across the day. And that can be hard. And kindergarten teachers know that. So typically they begin the year a little bit differently than where they end it. So giving the children more space and more time to have breaks so that they get ready and feel that transition into kindergarten. But it comes down to who you are and what you want for your child as a parent. and really thinking about who your child is, not who you want your child to be, but who your child is at that moment.
That makes sense. Thank you for debunking that myth, and thank you for breaking that down so delicately. That's why I call him Doctor, y'all, Doctor Brown. Right? You see how he dissected that. And he broke that down for us, and just with a true mastery, he just really dissected that. So thank you, Doctor, for breaking that down for us.
Happy to, Marcus.
Absolutely. COVID-19, 2020 was a tumultuous year, and it changed the world as we know it. It changed the education system drastically. How has, over the years of your extensive experience and research, how has kindergarten changed for the better? And how can we integrate back into society? I mean, virtual learning is now a thing now, where it wasn't before. Is there any benefit to virtual learning? What's the weight on that?
The benefit around virtual learning with 5-year-olds isn't clear right now. I think what virtual learning did was it was a stopgap for what was happening in the education community, where kids couldn't go to school safely. So that was a good thing to give children access to it. But what virtual learning also made us clearly aware of is that there is a difference of resources across families. Some families have access to computers and Wi-Fi with no issue. Others, it's a real struggle. They're working 2 or 3 jobs, and having enough devices for all the children in their house to be online at the same time was almost nearly impossible and stressful. You also have first responders who were working unbelievable hours, witnessing unbelievable things, and then they have a family of children at home they're trying to take care of, and everyone is stressed out. So the virtual part is complicated, it's messy, and we're going to not really understand all of it for a couple of years until it plays out some more. I think one thing, though, within that, we have to recognize how strong and resilient children are. I think the children over the past year and a half have learned things that we can't even imagine. They've learned how to handle a situation that we never want for any child to go through, and yet they've been able to do that and move forward as learners. Kids never stop learning. Even if school stops, they're still learning how to make sense of the world. So we have to really recognize that, nurture that, and support them as they go forward. In terms of children, there were a lot of children who missed the kindergarten year. Parents just said, we're going to wait on it. And in states like mine in Texas, kindergarten's not compulsory, so they don't have to go to kindergarten. They just have to start school by the time they turn age 6. So that means going into first grade. So there's some kids that have had different types of learning experiences going into first grade or going into kindergarten if they didn't go to preschool. So there, what matters is, as a parent or as a family member, being an advocate for your child, being able to have a personal conversation with the child's teacher about what your child's strengths are, what their growth areas are. And then we also have to support and nurture our teachers. They are professionals who are dealing with the same situations these families are dealing with, and they're coming into a situation they've never been in before as well. So being supportive, being caring, being forgiving is a really big part of that process too. I think we're all trying to figure out what happened last year, where kids are, and how can we support and push them forward in a way that makes them see themselves as learners and be positive about themselves. My biggest fear is that there has been some conversation around learning gaps and all these negative connotations of what might have happened to children. I'm not saying children didn't have bad experiences, but we need to focus on the strengths they bring and build off that. No one wants to be told they haven't had a positive experience. Rather, they want to see that they can be seen as someone who can be successful in the classroom and has an advocate for them and their teacher who's going to help pull them forward with this process.
Love it. What are some avenues or what are some steps that we can do to support kindergarten teachers? As a young man, both my parents are educators. They're in the education space, and it is intense. What are some useful tips that we can do as parents and families and communities to help support kindergarten teachers?
So reaching out to teachers and letting them know you're there. You can help out if maybe they went looking for volunteers. Maybe you can't come into the classroom, but maybe you can do some stuff at home, like cut paper or whatever it may they need to help get things ready for future activities. I think just showing up with your child and being supportive and nurturing towards the teacher. I think also as parents, we need to show some grace. Teachers are under a lot of stress, and so they need to know if something's going on, if your child's having a bad day, and maybe they didn't get to something you want them to, you shouldn't come in all hot and bothered, but rather come in just being kind and sharing your concerns in a way that's positive and nurturing so that you're forming a relationship rather than trying to create some animosity or a conflict. You know, teachers, it's a high stress job. They're managing 22 human beings, and not all those children are capable of expressing their needs in a way that is easy to manage. So we just have to remember they're working in a place where they need our support and our caring. and stepping in when needed. Sometimes if you notice something's going on in the classroom and the teacher's not getting the support they need, maybe as a parent going and talking to the principal and saying, hey, my kid's teacher needs this. Why isn't that happening? So having those advocates is just a really important part of the process. And you're building a friendship and a personal relationship with them while also showing that you care about them and you're willing to step in. And principals listen to family members. If they hear something from a parent that their child needs in the classroom, they're more willing to help step in and try to take care of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is it, and you touched on this, it's called in your book, it's called the kinder race, the kindergarten.
Oh yeah, yes.
And so touch on that. Can you break that a little bit of
Sure,
down? Because go ahead.
No, that's a different book. I actually, the way this all worked out, I wrote a different book about the kinder race. And it's more for people who are interested in kindergarten from a policy or a teaching or a research perspective. And that is the work I was doing is looking at how kindergarten has changed. And within that context of doing that research with teachers in Texas and West Virginia and at the national level, what we're noticing is that a lot of kindergarten classrooms are becoming places where kids are racing from skill to skill to skill. And in doing so, we're not paying attention to who the children are and what they bring into the classroom. So some teachers feel like they're under this gun to race their kids from the beginning to the end, rather than taking the time and having the opportunity to get to know their children and the families they work with on a personal basis. So that's my worry, is when we're racing, we're missing out. We want kids to leave kindergarten seeing themselves as successful, as capable, and as school being a place that fosters their interest and their desire so that they can become the learners they want to be. And when we're racing kids from skill to skill, rather than expanding their learning, we might be hindering it or turning them off from school. I mean, I think anyone who's been around schools know there are kids, by the time they get to second and third grade, they get burned out. And we don't want that to happen. We want kids to see school as a place that's going to foster and nurture their interest and help them see themselves as learners so that they can push forward and be successful within that context.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I told you guys, the man, the myth, the legend himself. We have one more commercial break from our sponsors of the show. You guys don't go anywhere. Stay with us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
If you're looking for a reliable, professional trucking and logistics service, you've come to the right place. Musa Trucking is a veteran-owned and operated premier transportation provider that can help with all of your trucking and logistics needs. Musa is revolutionizing the trucking industry through strategic partnerships, the development of core personnel, and the use of cutting-edge technology. Our inventory system ensures that cargo ends up divided into the right trucks and reaching the correct destination. Our drivers are dedicated to transporting goods efficiently and safely. Contact us today to get started by visiting the website on the screen or by calling 757-756-5246.
We are back. That was our show sponsor. Hope you all are tuning in to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. If you're just tuning in, jumping in for the first time, we have the incredible Christopher P. Brown, Dr. Brown. This man is spilling all the tea. Well, not all the tea, some of the tea that we need to pay attention to get us to a better place and to help our kids transition through school better, in a better way. If you missed that, go back, scroll back, and check him out. This is tea this is information. Is this how we make a better and brighter future? It starts with our children. So, doctor.
Yes, sir.
What should I look for when making the decision about which school to? There's a stigma, right? And I need your help. There's a stigma about between privatized schooling and public schooling. What things should I be asking myself as a parent who's on the fence and I'm about to send my child off to kindergarten? Which one's better? Which is the better place to start? Or what things should I ask or consider when looking at schools?
That better question, Marcus, is trouble. It's hard because I think it's what your desire and wants are for your children. And I think you have a different vision of what that might look like. I think I'm a big advocate for public education. My kids are in public schools. That's what I try to push for in my work. Because I see public schooling as Dewey talked about, this is a place where children learn to become democratic citizens. So we want them to be in a context where they're participating with children that are different from them, with families that are different from us, so that we get to know each other and help them be successful. And that can be hard in some public school contexts. But when you're looking for a school environment, the first thing I always say, when you walk into a school, does it seem like a happy place? Does it seem like a place where the teachers want to be there, where the children want to be there? Is it a place where everyone seems like they're committed to each other and going forward within everyone pushing forward with their learning in that process? And if it's not a happy place, that should raise some concerns for you. If you walk into a place where kids seem like they're down and out, where teachers are not talking in a way that's positive to their students, that should be a concern. And that can be either public or private. I've seen it in all sorts of different contexts. So one, is it a happy place? And two, is it a place where children seem to get along and get along with their teachers? I think that contributes to that happiness, but it's a little more clear and specific. When you walk if you walk by a classroom, do the kids seem engaged? Does the teacher seem like they're engaged with the kids? Particularly with young children in kindergarten, I think it's really important to be in classroom communities where kids, I call it choice and voice, where kids have an opportunity to choose some of their learning activities, where their voice is being heard by the teacher. If it's a classroom or a school community where the teacher is just standing up front and projecting all the information into the child, just trying to feed it into them, or what Freire calls banking it into their brains, that's not a place that's going to be real supportive of children's development and learning. So we just have to think about that as well. Essentially, can you see your child being in this community and feeling safe, successful, and cared for? And that's what matters the most. If kids feel like they're being supported, if the kids feel like they have an opportunity to contribute to the learning environment, and they feel like they can be successful, they're going to have a terrific and successful year in kindergarten.
Makes sense. Do you recommend families in that first that kindergarten year,
Sure.
whatever they decide to do, if they decide to go to kindergarten or they decide to skip? Because you just told us, you educated us that you can actually in some states skip kindergarten.
Yeah,
and
most
go
parents
to-
don't, but some people do.
Yeah. So what? So what should parents do? So is it better for a parent to be active more when their child that first year when they're in kindergarten? Does it help the learning curve? Does it help the learning process at all?
I think parents being active in their children's learning at any age helps with learning. It helps your child see the importance of the learning process. We're still active with our college daughters at learning. We're probably overactive, but we're trying to show her that we care and that we want to help support her and help her, because she's still only 20 years old. And so, we have a life experience that she doesn't, and we want to give her some ideas and thoughts and ways to talk to her professors and to think about what might be happening, not just this year, but in a few years down the road as she goes on and graduates. And so as adults within children's life, we have that life experience that they don't have. And so giving them some guidance, giving them some support in a positive and caring way can be so beneficial. Just be careful not to overdo it. Just be careful not to be too directive or negative. And within this process, I think to be very forgiving of yourself and of your children. One thing you're going to learn if you're really involved in your child's life as a learner, he or she is going to make a lot of mistakes, just like we do as adults. The key within that situation is to be there and support them, not to correct them or not to tell them they did something wrong, but rather help them figure out what went wrong and how they can correct it so that they can move forward. And then the most important thing is to help them recognize it's no big deal. We all make mistakes. We're going to move forward and we're going to be okay. I mean, we all have bad days, and no one wants to be judged by their lowest day of their life. They want to be judged by the entirety of their life. And so we have to think about with our kids as well, is just how can we support them and nurture them so that they see themselves as human beings who are going to, sometimes do great things, sometimes have bad days, but always know that we're there to care and support and push them forward so that they can be successful and become the people they want to be.
I love it. I wish I had a microphone to give him so he could drop it.
Thank you, Marcus.
Absolutely. Doctor, this is your page. This is your series of books. Really quickly, Can you share and break down these series of books and what people can expect when they go and make any of these series?
So the Resisting the Kindergarten Race book just came out, and it's the book I was talking about, looking at how kindergarten has changed from a practitioner and policy perspective. So it's geared towards those more in academics who are really interested, or researchers who are interested in the change kindergarten. The second book is a book I co-edited with a former colleague of mine. And we're trying to speak back to, there's a lot of conversation around young kids, around them being at risk. And we want to reframe that conversation in a way that supports children and families so that they can see themselves as being successful within the classroom environment. I understand why people use the risk narrative within policy to get money, but I think it's doing some damage to the conversations we're having among teachers and families about who children are and what they can do in the classroom. The third book, the Ready for Kindergarten book, is the one we've talked about primarily today. That's the one I wrote for parents and families to help think about going to kindergarten with their child. Why is readiness such a big deal? And then what can they do to help support their child and themselves within that process? The fourth book there, the handbook, is one I co-edited with some colleagues at different universities across the country. And we have multiple authors from all over the world just talking about issues in early childhood education, much more from a researcher perspective. But it's getting at the heart of the issues that face the field of early childhood education, which is typically from birth to grade 3 or age 8. And then the last book, Rigorous DAP in the Early Years, I'm also a teacher educator, and I wrote that for students in teacher education learning to teach young children. And that was based off a course I teach at UT.
Powerful. This man is busy, y'all. This man is busy. Doctor, this is powerful. How can we connect with you? How can we grow with you? How can we learn more from you?
So I think you have the links to my LinkedIn page. That's there. The Amazon page is there. I shared with you my UT website page. I have a personal web page. I'm not always the best on my personal page. I've got to do better to advocate for myself. But that's just part of the process. I'm a teacher at heart. And so I always think more about how am I supporting others within this process. And so all those things will give you access to what I'm working on and what I'm doing. You can go, if you're interested in my research, if you go to Google Scholar and type in my name, Christopher P., that middle initial is important, Brown, you can also see that and see all the type of research I've written from there. And then my address, I have a UT address, and I think it's come up, cpbrown@utexas.edu is my work address. And then I have a personal address, which I think I've shared with you, Marcus, profchrispbro@gmail.com. Any of those, if you want to reach out to me personally, I'm happy to get back to you.
Perfect. You all, this man is on a mission, right? The train has left the station. The research has been done, and now he's bringing it full focus for us. Doctor, what advice, what tips, what advice, if you had one more tool in your tool belt, if to speak to that young man, that young parent, that young boy or girl in the audience, that young family who's on the fence about deciding on whether to send their child to kindergarten, skip kindergarten, what one more piece of advice would you give that young family?
I think you needed the one piece of advice. I'd make the decision that you're not going to regret. That's the biggest advice. Whatever you decide to do, do it and don't look back. Just think about who your child is, what you can do to support them and push them forward, and just be there for them. And most importantly, Marcus, enjoy it. Your children are young once. Make it fun, make it exciting, and have those moments that you'll always remember together. It's just, I can't emphasize that enough.
Love it. Powerful. Absolutely. My pleasure. This has been dynamic. Doctor, I want to say thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to give back to us in a way. Thank you for educating us and expanding our knowledge about this, because I had no idea how important that first step, right? Kindergarten is the first step, and how crucial it is a decision to make the best decision, the fun decision for our children's future. So thank you. I want to say this to you publicly. When those moments when you're feeling down, don't ever quit. We need you. The world needs what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It has been an absolute pleasure to be on your show. I've had a lot of fun.
Absolutely. My pleasure to host you. And thank you all, my audience, for tuning into the Gentleman Style Podcast show. I hope this message has served you. I hope this helps take you and your household and your family to the next level. If you all are interested in getting a hold of the great doctor here, and if you can't for whatever reason, that link doesn't work, reach out to me and I will get you in touch with him and his webpage and his books. He has a series. He is a wealth of knowledge, a true expert in the field. So like I always end every show, take care of your family, take care of your home, and always take care of business. This is Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show, your favorite gentleman, and Dr. Christopher Brown, changing the kindergarten legacy.
Thanks.
We love you guys. Absolutely. We love you guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Take care. Bye.